All right. Yo, why don't you go ahead and take a seat, and we can get started. I found out recently that Mark had met his wife Megan through one of these early meet and greets at church, and so I think that's why he's been so passionate about it. So you never know, you may have just met your future spouse. Who knows? But for those of you who don't know, my name is Justin. I'm one of our elders here at Trinity. I serve as a lay elder, which means that while I'm part of our elder team and board, I do not work for the church. So I do this for fun, I guess. But I truly I love the church. I'm truly honored and humbled to get to serve in this fashion. Today we are continuing our journey in the book of Mark. And today we got into the story of the blind Bartimaeus. So today we're going to read and learn about the story of the healing of the blind Bartimaeus. And this story acts somewhat of a bookend for the section that we've been in for the last several weeks. The start of this section began in chapter 8 with the healing of another blind man. And since in this kind of section, what we've seen is a lot of Jesus teaching people and his disciples about who he is, about what he's come to do, and what it means to follow him. And throughout this, there's been this theme of as Jesus is teaching people about who he is, what he's come to do. He's very explicit about it. He is going to die, and he's going to rise again. And what it means to follow him, that the path of following him can be challenging. The people are just kind of missing it. There's this overall kind of theme that we've been studying about and reading about the last several weeks, where the people that Jesus is interacting with are a little spiritually blind to what he is saying. But Bartimaeus is different. And that brings us to the story of the healing of the blind Bartimaeus, and I want to see how he is different. So I'm going to read our passage today from Mark 10, verses 46 through 52. And they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabbi," or Rabboni, "let me recover my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. This is the word of the Lord. So when I was in college, and slightly after college, for about 4 years there, this guy, his name was James Wood. James is a good friend of mine, awesome, godly, holy man, met with me every week to disciple me. And it was some of the most influential time in my life. He's been one of the most influential figures in my life. And a lot of it was because of these weekly discipleship appointments. And so each week we'd get together, and some weeks we'd open up the Word of God and study the Word of God together and go through it verse by verse and talk about what it meant. Other weeks we would, he gave me my first book on systematic theology, and so we talked about some big theological topics and what the different sides were and the implications, and he would challenge me to kind of figure out what I believe. As a young single guy in my 20s, we spent a lot of time talking about girls and about marriage and what that would look like. Also, I was doing ministry at the time. I was doing ministry on a college campus as a student, and then I worked full-time doing ministry on a college campus for a few years. And so we talked a lot about ministry and how do you do ministry well? But one week, and I remember this really vividly, James taught me something that I've used almost every day since then, which is he taught me how to properly say the name of one of my favorite bands, favorite musicians, Sufjan Stevens. For years, I really struggled. I loved Sufjan for a long time up to this point, but I just could not say his name. No matter how much I tried, I just couldn't do it. So what I did was, my kind of master of this was I'd say it really fast and slur it a little bit so you didn't know that I was actually mispronouncing it. But finally, one week, we were at the Cafe Medici on the Drag across from UT's campus, if you know where that is, sitting upstairs. James was like, "All right, I've had enough. We got to fix this." And so he spent the next 20 to 30 minutes, and that's not an exaggeration. It took me a long time to figure this out, teaching me how to say Sufjan. Now, if you've seen the TV show Friends, there's that episode where Phoebe teaches Joey how to speak a different language. You know what I'm talking about? And there's a meme of it now. That's essentially what happened. James would look at me and be like, "Suf." And I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, Suf." And then he would say, "Yawn." And I would say, "Yawn." And he'd go, "Sufjan." And I'd say, "Surf Jan." Sifmon, Sifjun. I could not get it. Like, just no matter how much I tried, I could not get it. 10 minutes into this thing, I'd given up. Like, mentally, I checked out. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm just never going to be able to say Sufjan's name properly. It's okay. It's not that big a deal. My other favorite band, I can say their name right, The Beatles. That one's easy. 1 out of 2, that's pretty good. But James was relentless, and he kept working with me on it, saying Sufjan, Sufjan. And finally it clicked, and I got it. Now, after 15 years, I'm able to say it great. Like, I'm standing in front of all of you right now, confidently saying Sufjan Stevens with no problem, which I appreciate. But I also appreciate it because I feel like it's really prepared me today to give a sermon on Bartimaeus. I don't know if I could have done that 15 years ago, but here we are. But seriously, Bartimaeus' name is important. His name is really important. And so far in Mark, and actually in the entire book of Mark, no one who is healed, his name is given other than Bartimaeus. In fact, in all the synoptic gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, no one who is healed, his name is given other than Bartimaeus, right? Sometimes we get names of people that Jesus encounters and teaches. There are a couple of people whose names are given that their relatives are healed, but no one other than Bartimaeus' name is given who's the one who's actually healed. So this immediately differentiates the story of Bartimaeus from all the other healing stories that we've read so far. And there are probably several reasons for this. One of them is likely that Bartimaeus was known in the early church. Like, this somewhat kind of reads as a familiar origin story. It's like, hey, like, y'all know Greg. Here's Greg's origin story, right? You know Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus, he was sitting next to you at church on Sunday. Maybe you were praying with him. Maybe you saw him out in the market the other day. Like, this reads as a story of familiarity where we are just learning about the origin. But Bartimaeus' name has had now a great legacy. I mean, here we are thousands of years later talking about Bartimaeus on a Sunday. And we're not the only church that's doing that. There are probably churches all over the world that are talking about Bartimaeus this morning. There are people who are reading their Bible, who are studying him. In every commentary I read about Mark and about Bartimaeus, they always talk about Bartimaeus as the model of discipleship. Like, this is the person who gets it. Everybody else was spiritually blind, but Bartimaeus has spiritual sight. We should all be like Bartimaeus. And I think that's the point that Mark is making by using his name. His name is important. And what Mark is telling us to do is that we need to be like Bartimaeus. So that's what we're going to talk about today, church, is how do we be like Bartimaeus? 3 points for us today, and 3 things for us all to do. First, Bartimaeus cries out. He cries out. Second thing, Bartimaeus asks for sight. He asks to see. And finally, the last thing, Bartimaeus walks with God. So let's talk about a little bit about who Bartimaeus is and how he's described before he encounters Jesus. The text tells us that Bartimaeus is a blind beggar on the side of the road. Not a lot of words, but it tells us a whole lot about him. In the world that he lived in, being blind meant that he had probably no other options for livelihood, no options for money, for food, other than to beg. Right? Begging was the only way that he had livelihood. And because of that, he's on the low end of the social ladder, right? He's the social totem pole. He's at the very bottom of the social totem pole. They use the phrase that he is cast out. He's on the side of the road. That is, I think, metaphor to what Bartimaeus is viewed in society. Everyone else is on the road. The rest of society is on the road. And he's been cast aside on the side of the road. He's the low end of the totem pole here, a blind beggar. Another piece about this I think is important to know is that in this time, in this culture, not everybody had this view, but a lot of people had this view that if you had a disability like blindness, it was because of some deep personal sin that either you had or someone in your family had. So we see this in John. In John chapter 9, Jesus and the disciples approach a blind man, and the disciples ask Jesus, from whose sin is this person blind? Is he blind from his own sin or blind from his parents' sin? So there's this cultural belief that's held among many that if you have a disability like this, it's because of some sin, either that you've done or that someone in your family, like your parents, have done. So again, he is a social outcast. He is on the side of the road. He is the bottom rung of the social totem pole. So when Bartimaeus hears that Jesus is passing by, this man who others call teacher and they're called healer, Bartimaeus does something remarkable. He calls out to him as Messiah. Son of David, have mercy on me. The Son of David is not a casual title. It's very clearly messianic. God with King David had made a promise, a covenant with King David, that through his bloodline the Messiah would come. So by Bartimaeus calling Jesus the son of David, what he is saying is that Jesus is the fulfillment of that promise. He is the fulfillment of that covenant. Who God promised to King David is now here in the flesh in Jesus. And this is another first for Bartimaeus, is this is the first time that we're seeing somebody publicly proclaim Jesus as the Messiah, as the Christ. The first time we see someone publicly proclaiming it. A few chapters ago, we saw the disciples in private with Jesus call him the Christ, but this is the first time that we're seeing somebody publicly proclaim Jesus as the Messiah, as the Christ. The crowd, Bartimaeus proclaims, "Son of David, have mercy on me," and the crowd tries to silence him. It says, "Hey, be quiet, silence you. You're not worthy of being heard by Jesus. Be quiet." But what does Bartimaeus do? He cries out even louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And I love that, right? I love the kind of underdogness of it and kind of sticking it to the man. It's like, hey, nothing's going to hold him down. But I also love this because it makes me, I kind of start to question, hey, how would I respond in that situation? But even a better question would be, is what are the crowds in my life that are keeping me from crying out to Jesus? And maybe for church, the question for you is, what are the crowds in your life that are keeping you from crying out to Jesus? Is it that you feel unworthy? Hey, I'm unworthy. Jesus isn't going to hear me because I'm too unworthy, right? I have this sin issue I just can't shake. I've been dealing with this addiction to something like alcohol, pornography, and I just can't get rid of it. I am not worthy of being heard by Jesus. Jesus is not going to hear me because I am too unworthy of it. Maybe it's something big. Maybe it's a little more subtle. Here's how I do this. Here's how this looks like in my life. Is I mess up, I sin, and my immediate response is, "Come on, Justin, what are you doing? Come on, man, you're better than that. You know better than that." Jesus expects more than you than what you're doing and how you're responding in this situation. Next time, you've got to be better, right? My immediate reaction is to begin to blame and to put guilt on myself instead of turning around and seeking out and crying to Jesus. It's one of the crowds that I have in my life and that we may have in your life. Another one may be, instead of feeling unworthy, is that you feel like you don't need Jesus. Hey, I don't need him. I can do this on my own. Right? Our culture is full of these lies. This is exactly what our culture is telling us every single day. There's large groups in our culture that will act very much so say that hey, we don't need Jesus anymore. Jesus was a good teacher. He has some good ideas. He kind of pushed culture in the right direction, but now we've outgrown him. We don't need him anymore. We talked about some of these movements a lot recently, things like stoicism and expressive individualism and therapeutic and wellness cultures. But we won't go into the details of them today, but they all teach the exact same thing, which is you don't need Jesus. What you need is this thing. You need more discipline, more self-actualization and understanding. You need society to get fixed, or you need people to stop acting that way and to act a different way instead. Those are the things that you need for life. You don't need Jesus. That becomes a crowd to us. Sometimes for us, I think it looks a little bit more subtle. Recently, I was with some friends, and we were doing catch-up time, just going around the campfire, catching up. And one of my friends was talking about how they're having difficulties with one of their children, raising one of their children, or parenting one of their children, I should say, parenting one of their children. And they were talking about how they've read all these parenting books. They had a lot of conversations with Claude. Claude would have been really helpful with them. They were trying all these new things at home. And in their sharing, this is no questions, they were just sharing, they kind of came to this realization, they're like, man, I've been doing all of these things, and they're good things. We should read parenting books. Talk to Claude about stuff, I guess, within limit. Try things that you need to as a parent. And as they realized they had not once prayed to become a better parent for this child. They had not once asked their community to be praying for them or praying for their child. This was just a really easy area where they had crowded Jesus out. They began to try to figure this all on their own. Hey, I can be a better parent by just reading the right stuff, trying the right things, asking the right questions, and not seeking Jesus first. Both of these things are lies. The idea that Jesus will only hear us if we do the right things or we're worthy enough, or the idea that we don't need Jesus. Those things are both lies. They convince us that we don't need to cry out, but they're a misunderstanding of who Jesus is and who we are. Bartimaeus did not have this misunderstanding. He knew exactly who he was. He was a desperate man with nothing to offer, blind, begging, cast aside on the side of the road. But he also knew exactly who Jesus was, the only one who could actually help him. So when the crowd told Bartimaeus to be quiet, he cried out even louder. All of us, church, we all need that same posture. People who are desperate for the mercy of Jesus. We should all act like we're the blind beggar on the side of the road, that we have no other hope from Jesus, because that's just the truth of who we are. All of us have sinned. All of us have fallen short for the glory of God, and all of us have no hope other than Jesus and the life that he provides for us. But here's the great news for us, is that Jesus is a great God to have hope in. He is far more loving and merciful than we can ever possibly realize or imagine. Jesus responds not because we're worthy, but he responds to us and he hears us because we cry. Lord, may we all cry out to Jesus like Bartimaeus did. So our next point, Bartimaeus asks to see. Jesus hears his cry, he stops, and he calls Bartimaeus near. When Bartimaeus comes, Jesus asks him this one question. He says, "What do you want me to do for you?" What do you want me to do for you? Think about that for a second. This is the God of the universe, the King of Kings, standing in front of Bartimaeus asking, "What do you want me to do for you?" Here's the remarkable thing about this. This is the exact same question that Jesus had asked James and John that we studied last week, a few verses ago that we studied last week. The exact same question, exact same wording. What do you want me to do for you? And how do James and John reply? They ask for greatness. They ask for glory, right? They want to be sitting right next to Jesus, and they want to have all the greatness and glory that comes with it. But Bartimaeus answers differently. His answer looks very different than what we see from James and John. And there's something that's small, but it's worth calling out here because I really like it, is instead of identifying Jesus as son of David again, he calls him Rabboni. Rabboni is it's kind of like similar to the word rabbi, but it's much more personal. It's much more knowing and intimate. It's the same word that Mary Magdalene uses when she goes to the tomb and the tomb is empty and she sees Jesus. She addresses him as Rabboni, like this familiar aspect of teacher and leader. And that's the word that Bartimaeus uses. Because we see from Bartimaeus, he has this public boldness of proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah, but also there's this private intimacy. But anyways, how does Bartimaeus answer the question, "What can I do for you?" He says, "Let me recover my sight." Such a simple request, so human, yet it would provide him with an entirely new life. Right? His request is real and tangible. Real and tangible. It'll have significant benefit for him. But underneath, there's this metaphor, and we can't ignore this metaphor, right? Where what we saw from James and John was a spiritual blindness. What we're seeing from Bartimaeus is spiritual sight. The question then is, how would you answer that? If Jesus was standing in front of you right now, how would you answer the question, "What can I do for you?" Jesus, God in the flesh, standing right here in front of you, says, "Hey, what can I do for you?" What would you say? Would you ask for power? The power to make things the way that you want them to be, right? Your life, the world, your job, your family, whatever. Would you ask for the power to change it, to make it how you feel like it should be? How about money? Right, money is kind of tricky because money can kind of deceive us, and we think that any problem can be fixed with money, right? Hey, this problem that you have over here, if you just throw enough money at it, then it'll go away. That's what money tries to lie to us and tell us. Is that what you'd ask for? Would you ask for money, right? Do you think that money can fix all your problems? And hear me, if you're in a challenging financial situation, I don't want to discredit that because that is hard and that is challenging. But I also know and can very confidently say that money will not fix all your problems. But do you actually believe that? Would you be asking Jesus for riches? What about comfort and leisure? Maybe life is hard for you right now, you're tired, and all you just want to make things easier. Right? Just make things a little bit easier, right? I'm so busy, I don't have enough time to feel like I can really enjoy life and all its possibilities. So I just want to remove the stressors, remove the chaos, just make life a little bit easier. Is that what you would ask? I think for me, if I'm honest, my answer would probably look a little bit more like James and John sometimes than does Bartimaeus, right? A lot of my life sometimes is this endless pursuit of my own greatness. I have this almost insatiable desire to be great at anything that I want to do. If I want to do it and put my mind to it, I feel like I have to be great at it. So often I find myself in this cycle of just consistently pursuing my own greatness instead of pursuing the one who is great. But church, that's why I needed the story of Bartimaeus this week. And I think that's why we all need the story of Bartimaeus. Because when Bartimaeus was face to face with the King of the universe, the Lord of Lords, the Son of David, the one who spoke the universe into creation, he did not ask for power. He did not ask for money or for respect. He asked to see Jesus. Lord, may I see you. Church, may we all be like Bartimaeus. May our greatest desire, our primary pursuit, be to see Jesus more clearly. Bartimaeus follows Jesus. So Bartimaeus asks for sight, and Jesus responds, go your own way. Your faith has healed you, right? Go your own way. You're free. You've been healed. You've been saved. Now go do what you want. Go do what your life. Go do what you want. You're healed. Go live your life as you want. But what Bartimaeus does next is why I think that his name has endured. Why in all these commentaries he's listed as the model for discipleship. Why we are studying him this morning. Because when Bartimaeus, Jesus tells him to go his own way to go be free, what does he do? He follows Jesus. In response to the person and the mercy of Jesus, Bartimaeus follows him. The text says exactly this. And immediately Bartimaeus recovered his sight and followed Jesus on the way. He followed Jesus on the way. Now this phrase on the way can feel almost like a filler, like it's kind of tacked on, right? You're like, maybe you could remove this and say the same thing, right? Immediately Bartimaeus recovered his sight and followed Jesus. But Mark's actually really intentionally including this phrase on the way because it's been repeated frequently throughout the last several chapters. The last several chapters, what we've seen is this phrase on the way is used a lot because that's when Jesus is teaching. He's revealing who he is to disciples on the way to Jerusalem. He is telling them about what's going to happen, that he's going to die, that he's going to rise again on the way to Jerusalem. He's going to tell them about what life is like following Jesus, that it can be a life of suffering, a life of challenges, that Jesus is going to go and be beaten and hung from a cross. And he's teaching them all this on the way. So by including this phrase, on the way, what Mark is saying is that Bartimaeus is not walking an easy path. He's not going down the easy path. He's not falling down something that seems really simple. He is following Jesus through all the things that Jesus had already promised. He is following Jesus to the cross. And the road to the cross is not an easy one. This is true in a very literal sense. From Jericho to Jerusalem, it's about a 20-mile stretch, and it's known to be a really challenging road. There's like a 3,500-foot elevation change. It's known to be kind of the hardest stretch of this. So Bartimaeus is literally looking at a challenging road. But again, the metaphor I think is really obvious for us as well. What lay ahead for Jesus was suffering and for death. In Jerusalem, Jesus would be arrested, he'd be persecuted, he'd be crowned with the crown of thorns, he'd be beaten, and then he'd be executed by being hung on a cross. Yet Bartimaeus follows Jesus on the way. He follows not because the path is easy, but because the person of who Jesus is. Jesus is worth following regardless of the path. But here's the great news for us, church. Here's the great news for us, is the path of Jesus does not end at the cross. The story of Jesus does not end at the cross, right? Because 3 days later, the tomb where Jesus' body had been laid is empty. Our Christ has risen, he is alive. And many days later after that, he ascends into heaven. The book of Mark ends with this story. This is literally how the book of Mark ends in chapter 16. It says, the Lord Jesus was taken up into heaven and set down at the right hand of God. So where does the path end for those of us who walk it? In life, reunited with Christ, reunited with God. We walk the path knowing it's not always easy, but because the person and the mercy of Jesus are worth it. And we know where we're going. We know what the destination is. And that is united with Christ in heaven with God forever. Church, may we all follow Jesus like Bartimaeus. So I want to end with this. A little story from my week, and I think it's kind of representative of how I've been doing. It was definitely a God spirit thing that I got to spend the last several weeks meditating on the character and the person of Bartimaeus, because frankly, I needed this story. I needed this example. Just a little bit about me. When things get really chaotic in life and I get stressed and things get really busy, I had the tendency to just like put my head down and just like work my way out of it. It's like life is chaotic, life is busy, just put my head down and let's just grind my way through it. And once I get through it, then I can lift my head up and kind of take a breather. That's just my like typical reaction to things. And so that's how I've been for the last several weeks, frankly. Life has been a little chaotic, and so what I've done is head down, just working through it, just kind of trying to plow through it and get through it how I can. But this came to a head for me a bit this week. I was in Knoxville for work, so I was traveling for work, and coming back, there's no direct flight from Knoxville to Austin, so, and you know how flight travel is nowadays, which has not been very good. There's a lot of delays. So I found myself sprinting through the Atlanta airport. I started trying to drag my bag, but that was like creating too much drag, so I just picked up my suitcase and was like bear hugging it, like sprinting through the Atlanta airport. And I had to get all the way from, I was the end of C terminal, had to get all the way, sprint to go down the stairs, then get on the train, and then go to a different terminal, and then go sprint all the way down that terminal to get to my gate. And I had 8 minutes from the minute that I got off my plane to when my plane to Austin was supposed to take off. I had 8 minutes to do this. So I'm like bear hugging my bag, just sprinting, right, sweating. I'm in slacks and a coat and a jacket, running through the Atlanta airport, get on the train, go up the stairs, barely catch my flight, like nick of time, last person on the plane. I get in, I sit down and get on the plane, I just sit down, and it just hits me like a wave, like I'm exhausted. Like I'm just so tired. So I do what I always do when I get on the plane. The first thing is I put on my noise-canceling headphones, and I go to Spotify, and I find the Spotify playlist that Spotify made me like my most listened to songs of all time, hit shuffle, and I start thinking through all the stuff that I gotta get done, and what do I want to prioritize on this flight. It's like, hey, I got this endless to-do list, what are the things I want to prioritize and try to knock out while I'm on this plane? But the first song that played is a song called This Is the Sea by the Waterboys. Does anyone know that song? No? Cool. All right, now you all have homework. On the way home, go listen to the song This Is the Sea by the Waterboys. The Waterboys are a band, they were an Irish band, they were formed in the 80s. This song came out kind of in the mid-80s. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. So I encourage you all to go listen to it. But this is how it starts. It says, "These things you keep, you better throw them away if you want to turn your back on your soulless days. Because once you were tethered, but now you are free. Once you were tethered, well, now you are free. And that was the river, but this is the sea." And if you're feeling weary, if you've been alone for too long, or maybe you've been suffering from a few too many plans that have gone wrong, well, that was the river, but this is the sea. So this phrase, "that was the river, this is the sea," is kind of repeated throughout the song as it progresses. And the image that it's painting is the things that we've been carrying. The weight of our past, the weight of our sin, the version of ourselves that was tethered down. That's the river. Leave the river. Ahead of us is something better. It's bigger, it's more open, it's free, and that's what the sea is. Embrace the sea. The song is like literally throughout its words and its lyrics, it's calling us to go and to embrace the sea. And so as I listened to this, I realized that the source of my exhaustion was not the fact that I just sprinted through the Atlanta airport. It's not the fact that I've been traveling. It's not the fact that I've been working long hours because we've been in a really busy season of work. It wasn't even that we just added a third kid to our family and we're trying to figure out what life is like as a family of 5. And we have a 4-month-old who, sometimes sleeps and sometimes doesn't. And that's okay. My exhaustion wasn't from any of those things that were going on. My exhaustion was rooted in that I was still tethered to my own perception of myself. That I was pursuing and chasing my own greatness instead of trying to see Jesus. That I was weary because I was trying to navigate life on my own instead of crying out for help from him. And that instead of setting my eyes on Jesus and pursuing him, I was trying to walk my own path. And I was just grabbing Jesus by the hand and trying to drag him along for the ride. And that's when the Spirit reminded me of Bartimaeus. And that's why I needed the story of Bartimaeus so much this week, church, is because he spent his whole life tethered. He was tethered to blindness, to begging, to a roadside he couldn't leave. He had known pain, suffering, social exclusion, but in one moment, Jesus sets him free. Not to sit by the same road and do the same things, but with better sight, but to walk somewhere else new entirely. And Bartimaeus chooses and walks to follow Jesus. He left the river and he stepped into the sea. Bartimaeus shows us what real faith looks like. We see in this story, this is what real faith looks like. And when we're feeling weary, it's because we're typically missing one of these pieces, right? Maybe you've stopped crying out. You're quietly grinding, like I was quietly grinding towards a righteousness that you'll never reach on your own. Or maybe your ask has become chasing your own greatness. Wanting to be a great parent, a great spouse, an employee, a friend, which are all really good things, but when we make those our sole pursuit, and that's all we're chasing, we end up sprinting towards a finish line that continues to move, and that will never meet. And we just get tired. Or maybe you're still trying to walk your own path, and you're doing what I do sometimes, is just walk my own way and dragging Jesus behind me. But Jesus calls us to seek first his kingdom. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. It's what he teaches us on the Sermon on the Mount. Seek first Jesus, and everything else will come together. The life that Bartimaeus found wasn't absent of a hard road. He walked straight towards Jerusalem, straight towards the cross. The rest Jesus gives was never an easier life. It's a lighter yoke carried on the same road. So this morning, if you're feeling tethered, if you're feeling tired and weary or suffering, Jesus is saying, come to me. Right? Come to me, all who are weary, all who are labored and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That was the river. This is the sea. So church, as we transition to communion, the table in front of us, this is what the table in front of us is for, right? Bartimaeus cried out with nothing to offer but his need, and Jesus met him. He didn't clean himself up first. He didn't manage his own way or healing. He came as he was, and Jesus called him near. So that's the invitation for the table too, right? As you come to communion this morning, as you come to the table, we don't come because we've finally gotten our life together, because we fall well enough or bleed rightly enough this week. You come because we are weary and we are heavy laden, and we are in need of mercy. And Jesus says to come. So as you take of the bread and the wine, may you be reminded of the sacrifice that Jesus gave for you. As you come to the table this morning, cry out like Bartimaeus did. Ask him like Bartimaeus did to see him more clearly. And then as Bartimaeus did, get up from this table and follow Jesus out those doors. Let's pray.